Welcome to Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. It's the 50th anniversary of the feminist art movement, and Dismantling Patriarchy Bit by Bit is the title of a new book about how digital artists are transforming technology under the impact of feminist theory. The author, Judith Brodsky, documents the history and contemporary practice of such artists and suggests there is a direct link between the birth of digital technology, the conceptual art movement, and the rise of the feminist art movement. We're joined now by author, Professor Judith Brodsky, and Grimanesa Amorós, an award-winning interdisciplinary artist based in New York and whose work is featured in the book. Professor Brodsky, Grimanesa Amorós, welcome to Feminism Today. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us on.
First, I want to start off here with this thought. We are in the middle of the 21st century, re-examining patriarchy through the arts. When one looks at the history of digital technology and art through the lens of feminism, a picture emerges in which feminist art theory is actually playing a role not only in the development of digital art making, but also how we're experiencing digital technology. Can you help us understand what we are, or what was the original limitations imposed on us through technology? Professor Brodsky, let me start with you.
Okay, great. So the problem is that our society sort of associates technology with men. And so the assumption is that it's men who are involved with technology. And what happened is that when digital technology became used by artists, everybody just assumed that the history of digital art was a male-dominated area. And so the women who were pioneers in digital art just got completely erased. And so if you look at many of the books on digital art over the period of time since the late 1960s, which is when digital art really started, because it wasn't until then that ordinary people could have computers and make art that was somehow derived from digital technology. So what happened is that it looks, if you see the history, it looks as if it's only men. But there were women, for instance, like Lillian Schwartz, who was the one and only artist, never mind woman artist, but one and only artist who had a residency at Bell Labs, and who was one of the artists who established some of the aesthetics that we associate with computer art. And she was one of the very first artists, maybe even the very first, who used animation in conjunction with what she could create on the computer, and created these incredible animated pieces that are really wonderful examples of digital art. And yet it's really hard to see her work exhibited with all the work by male artists who came after her.
Grimanesa, how are artists transforming this patriarchal context and transforming its meaning and making it accessible?
Well, I think that we all artists have a very big, important responsibility about how we could keep on transforming, the art world, and then until it's gender blind, basically, mm-hmm. and I think that, sometimes we have allocated ourselves in the different geographical parts of the world that we could be, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously it's going to be different in India or in the Middle East as it could be, in Europe or the United States.
Can you tell us a little bit about the impetus behind this movement from the outset?
Sure. Well, this is a really exciting year, 2022, because it's the 50th anniversary of the feminist art movement. And if you look back at 1972, all kinds of things happened to bring women artists to the fore so that people realized that there was a history of women artists, that women artists were active today, that women artists were innovators, and that they were creating art that was just as good as anything that a man was creating. So in 1972, the women who belonged to the College Art Association, that means women who were teaching both art history and studio art at colleges and universities and art schools, they formed the Women's Caucus for Art, because what was happening is women were trained as artists and had PhDs as art historians, but they weren't being hired on faculties. So students never saw, a woman artist and didn't think that women artists existed. So they created the Women's Caucus for Art to change that. And today it's definitely a different situation. And they've been very successful. Then another thing that happened in 1972 was Linda Nochlin published her famous article, Why Are There No Great Women Artists? That showed it wasn't a question of women artists not being able to become wonderful artists. It's that society didn't let them become artists. Women were not permitted to go to art schools. They couldn't draw the male model. They were kept from doing any big commissions because they weren't trained to draw nudes. So it wasn't women who couldn't be artists. It was that society didn't let them become known as artists.
So the movement, the feminist art movement, has certainly evolved across 50 years. Grimanesa, your work currently redefines public art to address social, political, and cultural issues at the heart of the 21st century feminism movement. We're talking about the character of local communities. It touches on the environment as well as inequality and gender and race bias, quite frankly. How did you fall into this space? And can we talk a little bit about some of the themes explored in your work?
Well, basically, the essence of the work that I do is that I want the architecture, right, the space and the artwork and the viewers to become one, right? And so by that, I have to activate the community. And I feel that education, it has been always very important to me. And I start by a lot of research and development about not only the community, but maybe the states or the country. So I want to make this interaction with the viewers to learn more about their own cultural heritage. So I think that I like to work all together. Sometimes it could be with the city, with the major university foundations. And for me to keep educating women, I still keep doing myself to know exactly what it is to be, a woman. I think we could all work together, and we have been proving that we have been doing this, already for, like Judy said, for the last, I think, 50 years. To the point is that I really want to share that the biggest commissions that I have ever had has been always given to me by a powerhouse woman that I admired. So yes, that I wanted to share that.
Curator and an academic. What came first?
Oh, definitely being an artist came first. And I was an artist from the time I was little. My parents say that I picked up a pencil and started to draw pictures before I could walk or talk. But the point is that everything that I've done comes out of my being an artist, that idea of creativity, of using my skills, not only in the studio, but using them in the larger world outside the studio. All of that stems from my being an artist and wanting to shape things for the better. I want to comment, if I may, on what Grimanesa was just saying, because I think the big difference between women artists who are using digital technology and interdisciplinary art and men is that women do it in terms of social justice, in terms of community, as Grimanesa was talking. And I think she's a wonderful example of and represents, the approach that women artists take to using these materials and their involvement in community, whereas men are much more interested in the technical aspects of digital art or the formal aspects. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yes, I would like to add something, Judy. I think I agree with you. It's not just about creating these large space with a sculpture, but it's about what is the reason as to what we are doing, right? I think that we could go further in being a little bit more thoughtful, that we really want to create a social empowerment, I would say.
Right. So what's evident here across time and in the contemporary context is that women's ideas and imaginations have really been crucial to the development of old and new technologies. It's manifesting in different ways, in different action items, the way where women are engaged in different issues and the different passions that they carry. Professor Brodsky, what are some of the feminist concepts that we see in art today that have been absent across time?
Well, I would say a couple of things here. One is to look a little bit. I want to pick up in answering your question. I want to pick up a little bit on what Grimanesa and I were just talking about. If you take an artist like Laura Poitras, who wrote who directed, I don't know if she directed it, but she's the auteur for Citizen 4, which was, the film about, finding out all the information about surveillance that was being done in the United States. And then she did other work about surveillance, and also she participated with Forensic Architect, the group called Forensic Architecture. They did an installation in the Whitney Biennial a few years ago about Safariland, which the vice chair of the Whitney board, Candor, that was one of his companies. And they did a whole installation about what's called triple chasers, which are tear gas cans that are, three of them are connected at once. So they create even a bigger area of tear gas thrown at demonstrators and so on and so forth. And their actions, that particular installation and her film, it resulted in Candor having to resign from the board of the Whitney. So it was really, I think, a wonderful example of how artists can influence what happens in other sectors of society.
Grimanesa, there's one work of yours that I've seen that's just absolutely breathtaking. It's the installation. You were commissioned to this installation in Mumbai. And I haven't been to Mumbai, but I've seen the images. Can you talk a little bit about what you, about that particular project, but what you were hoping viewers, consumers would walk away with?
Well, going a little back, taking what, Judy was saying as well, is that I think that truly men are getting used to seeing and working with women who are confident and know what they want. And I think that the project Golden Array in Mumbai is a perfect example, right? Being in Mumbai, I was really basically the only woman and having 100 men that, gladly I was, bossing around well, but, or telling them better what to do. So I think that they're getting used to, and I try to incentivize this also in younger artists any time that I can. Working in Mumbai, you have a lot of challenges, right? You go to a site that is still in construction, you have overheat over 40 degrees, but then at the end, the job has to be done. So, but one of the aftermath that I have been receiving a lot of comments, right? Even from, which is very interesting to me, is how they now look at their own cable system, not only Mumbai, but throughout India. And so for me, this cable system, golden array, was a way that I could unify all of India, which is very vast. At the same time, they would identify it, and it was sort of universal for me, right? It was always there for a long time. And the cabling, being talked about with the technology is going to just keep on adding. And so it was, I think that it had a lot of layers that the people in Mumbai could identify themselves as well. So for me, of course, it was the largest, it was, monumental. It's about, 4-story building floors, and it's about 3 blocks. So you just, like we were discussing, before with you and Judy, it's that, we women, we know what it has to be done. And that's, when you love what you do, you just go forward.
Very nice. Now, Professor Brodsky, I don't know if you've seen the work. I don't know if you, in this context, you can comment on what are some of the assumptions that we make about men and technology and women and technology, as evidenced in the work that Grimanesa is referencing in Mumbai.
Right. Well, I think that the scale on which Grimanesa works is something that you usually, that the society, when I say one usually, society in general assumes that it's men who are going to do things on that kind of scale. And they don't expect a woman artist to be doing something like that. So I think that's a really important example. And then I also, they're the ones that I wrote about, her installations that I wrote about in the book. One of them is in Brooklyn, where the use of lights and movement of the lights illuminated a bandstand in a park. And again, that's the, here's a building that's, full of light and movement, and that's a structure that, a lot of people can fit in. And I would guess that if you asked somebody who came by and looked at it, who designed it, and they would say, oh, it must be a male artist, and not think in terms of it being a woman artist. Yeah. So I think Grimanesa has been a really important artist in terms of using digital technology and other kinds of technology in ways that extend the way in which people think about women artists.
Yeah. What are some of the, I guess, the issues that you're confronted by, Grimanesa, when people meet you? What are some of the things that you sort of experience as an artist? And in this context of the assumptions about male art and technology?
Well, it is true what, Judy says. They, they don't think that it's absolutely 100%. They don't think that a woman has been, is behind that type of work. Absolutely. I had to say that my exposure and growing up, in Peru, and being the daughter of an engineer, perhaps made me feel very comfortable with architecture, space. Like you mentioned, she chose to spoke about Hedera, which was the work that we did at Prospect Park. And it had to be very well thought, because what happened is that you have the architecture of the bund shell that it has been there since, the 70s, right? You have this vast, Prospect Park is just so, enormous. And then you have the individuals that they want going to be part of this work. Yeah. So I had to think, that's the name Hedera, actually. I'm sure that probably Judy knows, but I don't know if you might be aware that it's a Latin word for ivy. And what I discovered is that in Prospect Park, because I wanted to see how I will be able to unite the park, the architecture of the bund shell, and all the viewers that we're going to see and be part of the artwork. Yeah. And being that this Hedera, this ivy, grew in different parts of the park, and they were covering so much geographic area within, I thought that it was, very appropriate, to use the word hedera, and plus, the passersby were going to be actually curious to even know
Right.
what the name, means, right?
Yeah.
But going very quickly, back, I think that I have learned to navigate. Of course, and on, one of the things that I notice from one installation to the other is that I always have to remain, I'm still, probably, kind, but I'm very firm. I have to be always firm, because they might want sometimes to get their own way. And I said, no, I will do this at this time and at this date.
Yeah.
So I that's what I mentioned before. You truly have to be assured and humbly have the confidence that
Yeah.
it's going to allow you to be able to do these large pieces like Judy just mentioned.
Yeah. I want to talk about the book. An absolutely brilliant book, but I want to talk about the new language of art that has emerged in the discourse. Perhaps, Judy, you can read the passage that we mentioned on page 65, and then we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. While male authors were interested in the stylistic application of hypertext to literature, feminist digital artists saw it as a way of dislocating traditional forms of narrative that were infused by masculinism. In being drawn to hypertext literature, they followed in the footsteps of writers like Virginia Woolf or Gertrude Stein, who preceded them in using forms of experimental writing to differentiate their creations from work they viewed as denigrating and dismissive of women. And Shelley Jackson is one of the best known of the hypertext authors, and she did a book called The Patchwork Girl, and the idea was to create the woman in the story through doing this kind of patchwork where you could have all these links all over. And she designed some of the screens so that they look like a patchwork quilt. So then it very much relates to the way in which the body itself has disappeared. The body, as several artists have been working on this, the body becomes a set of pixels.
Grimanesa, the female body is not part of your work. I can't find it anywhere in your collection. Was this a conscious decision? Are you thinking it's time for us to consume different types of art? Tell us about the conscious decision to sort of not include this in your work.
Well, I think that it has been always a conscious decision. It's just because there have been, I think that the woman's body is actually, incredible, complex and beautiful. And as Judy was said, it's a gaze and mesmerized, not only, male figures, but also all of us women, right? It's just, beauty. And it just happens to be that somehow the way that I will see woman is just more of a like a bigger picture of it, not just the beauty, but how we could, Judy speaks also in, her book of course about AI, about VR, and about, AR. I mean, I think that, I am much more inclined to share in a more of a VR sort of context, because for me, it always has been more important how all of us could immerse into it, right? So that's how I see it. But of course, I have to be influenced, by women. I adore women. Like I said, I don't think half of my, largest monumental sculptures would have been possible without the support of another amazing powerhouse of a woman, like I've just previously said. It is something that it is, a part and an inspiration, I will say.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit in the few minutes that we have left about identity politics, representation, diversity in feminist art, what we see here in the United States, but also what's happening around the globe? Professor Brodsky?
Sure. Well, what Grimanesa was just saying leads into this, really beautifully, because Legacy Russell, who's a very interesting artist / curator, writer, critic, she talks about the fact that the internet offers the opportunity for people to be whatever they want to be.
Right.
That the patriarchal world defines everybody. You know, so and so is a woman, this other person is a man, somebody is African American, somebody is you know, Asian, and so. But the internet offers the chance. The whole world of digital technology actually offers the chance for people to be whatever they want to be,
Right.
rather than being defined by the patriarchy. The other thing, you know, I wanted to say in response to what Grimanesa was saying was that there are many ways to dismantle the patriarchy and to make a society in which all individuals can find themselves and reach their potential.
What does or should advocacy and activism look like in the art world?
Mhm.
Well, I think it takes different forms. I think that that my book is basically almost all artists who are activists, and they're activists in different ways, in different aspects of seeking, of finding ways to make art that expresses the search for social justice, whether it's about representation of the body or whether it's about surveillance and other forms of oppression by governments of various sectors of the population, or whether it's about modes of knowledge like literature, which are tend to be patriarchal, and can be changed to be more reflective of various groups of people within the society. So I think that's one way. I think another way is through making sure that we look at the statistics, you know, how many women are being shown in the galleries, how many people of color are being shown in the galleries, how are the museums doing their collecting. There's, for instance, one of the things that's of concern right now is that there have been a number of blockbusters featuring African American artists, but museum collecting of work by African American artists is only less than 5% of the work that's being collected by museums right now, according to the latest statistics. So, you know, so there are actually issues that artists can join together and protest in terms of visibility, in terms of acceptance, as well as through their artwork.
And I think we'll leave it there. That's it for our program today. Remember, you can follow me and the show on Instagram or Twitter. Thank you so much for watching Feminism Today on Free Speech TV. Join us again next week.